So for the past 12 weeks, we've attempted to build some projects, and today I thought it would be best to discuss this topic because I believe that the main aim of the study group, besides building projects to revise our fundamentals, was so that we would all have something to show potential employers for employment. So today we are going to briefly discuss what I call the front-end interview checklist. Okay, so let's start with a food for thought. And it's a quote by Anthony De Curtis that says that interviewing is a lot like talking, but you have to guide the conversation and you have to know what you want and go about getting it. So I'm starting with this because I believe that everything I'm about to say now, you'd find in this particular quote. So let's have this at the back of our mind as we go through this presentation. Now, these are 4 misconceptions about technical interviews that I'd like us to discard before we proceed. The first one being, there are a lot of people who believe that only those who meet the job requirement, that's 100% are qualified. The second one is that those who can answer all questions correctly get the job. The next one is that only data structures and algorithms gurus get the job. And the final one is interviews are setups for failure and intimidation. I believe that as we proceed, you'd come to understand why none of this is true. What is the purpose of interviews anyway? I'm sure we all have our own. If I should give the chance for people to suggest, there will be a whole lot of different responses. But I believe that the purpose of interviews can be classified as these 3 questions, and that at every given interview, you realize that whatever you do, whatever you are asked, whatever you say, falls under one of these. So we have, what have you done? What do you know? And what can you do? Now let's proceed to take these one after the other. What have you done? So but I titled this Show Your Work, because you'd agree with me that in this industry, your portfolio is, I would say, the most important thing that you can have. And I would give an example where personally, it wasn't until I built a portfolio of all more like a put together projects that I had done before that I started to get opportunities in the field. Okay, in the past, I mean, before building the portfolio, I would try to approach potential employers and say, oh, I'm a front-end developer and I want an opportunity. I want to be an intern. I want to be I need work, I'd say. And the first thing that they will ask me is, where's your portfolio? What have you done? Like, show me something you've done before. And, in the beginning, it didn't really sound like much. Normally, if they said, what have you done? I would show, for instance, maybe my GitHub and say, okay, these are some of the things that I've done. But with time, I realized that that was a very wrong approach, because for how do you call it? If you are to meet a potential employer for, say, 2 minutes, he or she doesn't have time to check your GitHub to see the code that you've written. For a front-end developer, you should be able to show like visually something that you've built. And that pushed me to put together about, I think in the beginning it was about 4 projects that I had done. I put them together, bought a domain and hosted it and put the projects there. And maybe people would call it a miracle, but from that point, I just started getting engagement. Even people that I had not spoken to would see my website and then reach out. And that's when I became, I would say, an evangelist of portfolios or projects. Like always telling everybody who wants to, like who would listen, that please put your work out there. You don't necessarily have to buy a website, a domain, or like build a website and put your project there. But we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all these platforms where you can build stuff and show your work. Okay, so before you go into an interview, most times the interviewers have either looked at a project that you've built, or at the interview, they are going to assess a lot of things based on a project you've built. Now, if you are to bring a project forward, this is how the flow would go. First, the interviewers are going to want to assess your skill level from the project. So that is why it is not just any project that you send forth for interviews. Okay, you could build, say, 5 projects, but you should always have one project that, first of all, solves a problem. And I call it a project of value, or a project that you're proud to talk about. And the interviewers are going to use that to assess how good of a developer you are. That's not the only thing, but also from that, they are going to assess collaboration. So at an interview, when the interviewers are going through the project that you've built, they are going to want to know, did you build this project by yourself? Did you build with others? And whatever answer you give to that is going to lead to follow-up questions that will let them also assess. Now, you built it with others. They are going to ask you follow-up questions to want to to check your sense of initiative, how well you work in a team, how well you rally people, your people skills, your communication, and your leadership skills. So that's for collaboration. Now, the final thing that will come up for your project or your portfolio is choices. And choices here is the interviewers are going to want to know, why did you pick this particular programming language? Or why did you pick this particular framework to build this project? Or for instance, if you use React, why React? Because you could have used Vue, you could have used raw HTML, CSS, you could have used anything else. There's Remix, they are all like the other frameworks. But why this particular one you choose? They are also going to want to know the reason behind the colors that you choose, especially since it's a front-end project, the colors, the color combination, and the arrangement, alignment, all that. So when I say that you are to send forth a project, for interviewers, you need to send a project that you have thought of, okay? And for the choices, they ultimately want to know if the decisions that you made, okay, if the decisions that you made were based on performance and accessibility. Yes, there's it should be beautiful, it should be appealing, visually appealing, but it should be functional, and it should be accessible. Those are the topmost things that the interviewers want to know from a project that you've built. Now, the next would be, what do you know? So I have tagged this promote yourself, because I believe that this is a chance to distinguish yourself from other candidates. You'd agree with me that for technical interviews, if you take, let's say, 5 to 10 candidates, almost everybody would give a similar response with regards to why they chose, for instance, React over Vue, or Remix over React, or Next.js, and all that. But it's at this point that the interviewers would want to know what exactly makes you stand out. And from here, the like normally people would say that even though you are interviewing for a developer job, companies are not looking to hire a robot. Okay, so it's at this point that they check your confidence, your eloquence, and then your assertiveness. So the responses that you are going to give to the questions that were asked in the previous slide are going to show how confident you are. You need to be able to own your work. If truly you did what you say that you did, for instance, if you brought a project here and then they're asking you, why did you place this button here? Or why did you choose this color? Every interviewer is expecting you to flow, okay, like to be confident, to speak out, and to be firm. Now, the assertiveness used here, mostly at interviews, some of the interviewers will try to challenge you, okay. Most times it's very intentional, and they will challenge you in the sense that, for instance, if you brought a website and you say, oh, I built this in React Next.js, they are going to ask you why you didn't, for instance, maybe use Vue. And you would definitely get an interviewer that would say you should have used Vue because Vue is better. Now, how are you going to argue your point? How are you going to let them know that like communicates the reason for your choosing Next.js without coming across as aggressive or impolite, etc. And that's where the assertiveness comes in.
Can I interrupt you, Ophy, if you don't mind? On the previous slide, because there were also one question about what type of projects can you recommend and about how many. So what I would suggest, so I'm an engineering manager, and I kind of like look at review applications almost on a daily basis. And one of the things, as a person who wants to hire for my team, some of the things, let's say like I want to look at freshers, right? Or with people who don't have experience or come from non-traditional backgrounds. The thing that I am curious to know is, what have you learned? So it's about the projects. It can be a very simple project. It can be like a very simple one, a to-do thing. It does not matter. Or it can be just like a simple website. What I'm interested in is like, your passion. So tell me about, why did you learn? What did you learn? And how did you learn? So the learning is very important, because in your first years, you don't have experience, and all you can have is a very good learning motivation. Actually, the learning never dies. It doesn't mean that with experience, the learning ends. That's not the point. But when you don't have experience, what you can demonstrate on a high level is your learning capacity. And if I were to hire you for my team, I'm interested to know, what have you learned and what have you gone above and beyond to sort of achieve that. So that's like, I guess kind of also aligns with the point that Ophy was trying to make. So yeah, and if you know what you've done, you will be confident yourself, you can assert, and like those are the things. So focus on the tiny things that you all try to do it. So and about like going back to the resume, I kind of also like to highlight on certain points. So make sure you know what you've done so that you can talk about it. It can be just one topic. It doesn't have to be like 10 topics, but whatever you know, try to know it in detail, try to be confident about that part. So that's like very important. So I just wanted to like kind of highlight that. And then there was also another question about how many projects. So here is like, quality is what would matter over quantity. So you can have like 10 or 20 projects in your portfolio, so which would kind of like, might be appealing, but I could like, randomly choose one project, right? And if you are not confident about that, then it kind of like starts bringing down my attention, or I would see those as red flags. It could be just that somebody else did that, or like, you are not passionately involved with that. So it might be just one project, or it can also be half a project. So this is something that I kind of actively tell folks. It doesn't have to be a finished project. It can be just one project. It can be a half-baked project. But as long as you can tell about what have you learned with that, and are able to identify what you could have done better to sort of finish that, I guess that's what is important. So this is like the gist of the message that kind of aligns with what Ophy is trying to tell. Yeah, go ahead, Ophy.
All right, thank you for that, Francia. Okay, so the final question that interviews are meant to answer would be, what can you do? And I think, as Francia said, now the interviewers, for instance, for somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, the interviewers have gotten to know the knowledge that you have, what you know. Now you need to show what you can do. And it's at this point that I say that you are as a candidate, you get to show the interviewers that you can give them value for their money. Okay. And there are a number of ways that you demonstrate what you can do, and you can to prove your knowledge. You can have take-home assignments. There's some interviews that you go to, and you are given a project to go and build, and a time frame within which you're supposed to submit it. Yeah, you can also have live coding sessions. For the live coding sessions, it's a lot of people are not big fans of it, because sometimes you get to answer data structures and algorithms question. Other times you have to build projects on the spot, no matter how small. But this is not to set you up for failure or to intimidate you in any way. It's just so that the interviewers can assess how quickly you can think on your feet. They and you know, like the best part is that for most interviewers, they would even encourage you to talk them through your thought process. Okay, so it's ultimately not even so much about what you do or what you build at the end of the day. So that's it points back to one of the misconceptions that I mentioned. You don't necessarily have to build it right to get through. But if you can show the interviewer that, like, you take them through your thought process, at this point, this is what I'm thinking. They just want to know, when given a problem, how do you think it through? How do you break it down? How do you tackle the problems? And from there, they'll be able to make their decision if you are like you're fit for the team or not. And this is also the point at which you demonstrate value, as I said. So even before you get into the interview, you need to understand some of the problems that the company has and how you can help fix some of these things. But if as a beginner, you do not, for instance, have much that you can show, thinking like communicating how you are thinking about a problem and how you hope to how do you call it, to address it, it's a big win for you at this point. So that should be the main focus, and not about quickly finishing the work or presenting it as fast as you can. Now, with these three questions being answered, the next slide would um, be 5 things that I think we shouldn't forget. Now, the first I would say is to do your own research. The own here is capitalized because you don't want to get to the interview and not be able to defend anything that you see. Okay. As Princia mentioned, the confidence with which you'd defend whatever you see would show whether you own it or not. So, like, do your research, the research about the interviewers, about the company, their culture, everything, that any kind of information that you can lay your hands on. Because, you know, like, one way that interviewers are able to tell that you didn't do good research during an interview is when at the end of the interview, the interviewer would ask you, okay, so do you have any questions for us? And you say no. That's a red flag. I mean, a lot. Some of the interviewers will say it's okay. I mean, it's fine, but most often than not, it's not, because if with all the information about the company, the role, like the project, everything online, if you did your research, you should be able to find something to ask. Now, the next one is, as has been said earlier, be prepared to defend your skills. Okay, no matter how little your knowledge is at the time, be prepared to defend what you know. And this goes to say that when we are like learning for an interview, even like not just for an interview, but when you are learning in general, make sure that you try and understand the reason behind some of the things that you are learning. So not just like doing surface studies. And that's what differentiates developers. Okay, so we can have two front-end developers. There's one who can build, let's say, everything that you say the person should build in React, they can build it. But they don't really understand what happens under the hood. But there's this other developer who can also build, probably not even as good as developer A, but the little that she can do, she understands. She understands how things work, like under the hood. She understands how, like runtime, how JavaScript works, how like, and all that. That would be preferred in most roles than, I'd say, a surface learner or a generalist. The next point is that value is a two-way affair. Okay, when you are going into an interview, you have to be prepared to demonstrate that you can add value to the team and the company that you are going to join. Not just like be so concerned. Your main concern shouldn't just be, oh, how much am I going to be paid? Definitely there will be the time for that, and of course you have to negotiate and negotiate very well, but you should first of all think about how you are going to add value to the team and the company that you are going to join, because once interviewers sense value, there's no limit to what you can get. Okay, now the next point will be that every no is a step closer to yes. So I am very sure that a lot of us, I'm saying I'm very sure because I have personally been in this position where I have, in the past, there were some interviews that I didn't attend because I was scared. I was scared that I was going to get a no. So I didn't even go like forward with the interview at all. But later I realized that that was a very big mistake, because interviewing is a skill. Okay. So the more you do it, the better you become at it. So even if, and it's not good to shoot yourself in the foot, or like to how do you call it, to discourage yourself even before you attend the interview. But before you attend an interview, of course, be optimistic. But once you have an opportunity, please attend the interview, because from every interview session, you learn something. From every interview session, from every no that you get, you learn, and it will help make the next interview better, which is sort of ties into the next point, which is to seek feedback. It's not enough to just go to an interview 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then after the interview, you say bye bye and then you go off the call. No, the most important, I actually think that that's the most important part of the interview. If you are lucky enough at the interviewer is going to tell you what they thought about you and what they thought you could have done better and all that. But if not, please ask for feedback, either on the call or after the call. Send an email, say thank you, and ask how you did and what the interviewer thinks you could have done better. Because even though you might interview for different companies, okay, you realize a pattern, and the feedback from an engineering manager, a team lead, a senior engineer that you get, if you are to improve upon whatever it is in the next interview, is going to bring you a step closer to getting a yes. Now, the last thing that would talk about are some resources that you can use to prepare for an interview, specifically the front-end interview. So we have the front-end interview handbook. There's also the project on GitHub, and there's a free front-end interview prep course by Udacity. There's also a front-end handbook practice interview by front-end masters. And finally, you can also have front-end experts. There are a lot of questions and answers that you can find. You can also go on Lead Code, HackerRank, like to solve some questions there as well. But in general, whatever like it is you want, if you Google it, you're going to find it. So I'd end by saying that preparing for interviews, like even if that's your 10th interview, there's always the need to prepare. Okay, you don't just prepare for interview if it's your first or you say it's your second, or but there's always the need to prepare, like no matter the interview that you're going for, always go in over prepared rather than like not prepared at all. It's always like good to have or to be more prepared than even like you need to be. And if you approach all interviews with this kind of mindset and answering all these questions and having all these pointers under consideration, I'm very positive that you're going to get more yeses from your front end interviews. So thank you so much for your audience. And at this point, if there are any questions, I'll take them.
Cool, that was very good. Ophy, thank you so much. There were like a couple of questions which I answered. Yeah, so if you have further questions, feel free to write or ask us in the channel. And yeah, Ophy, can you also share the slides in the front end Slack channel so that people can have access to the resources?
Okay.
Yeah, feel free to ask your questions. Yeah, a good way to be around is in the Slack. So most of us are in the Women Who Code Slack. I pasted the link already, but this is the again in case you all missed it, and that's a good way.
So I saw someone ask how you can connect. So sorry, that was the last slide that I didn't show. So my GitHub, Twitter is at Ophy Boamah, and my website is at codehema.com. So anywhere, or you can just search Ophelia Boamah on LinkedIn, and we can connect from there.
Cool. So
thank you.